Good evening, everybody. I'm truly honored to be here today with you, and also honored to introduce the amazing lineup of panelists that we have to talk with us today. Our panelists are current and former community school coordinators, as well as experts in building community school capacity. And the insights and the wisdom that you're going to hear from them today are based on decades of experience. So first up, we have Emily Grijalva, who is the Restorative Justice Coordinator and the Community School Coordinator at Felicitas and Gonzalo Mendez High School in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. And Emily brings a background of 12 years of teaching experience and a certification in school counseling. Next, joining us, we have Dr. Carol Hill, who is the Executive Director of the San Francisco Beacon Initiative. Dr. Hill is a former San Francisco Beacon Director and Community Schools Coordinator and has 30 years of leadership experience in educational programs. We also have with us Araceli Huerta, who's the Community School Coordinator at Sycamore Junior High School in the Anaheim Unified High School District. Araceli brings more than 11 years of experience working at the district as a family and community engagement specialist and community liaison. And last, but definitely not least, I think I learned today the term lucky last, which I like. Joining the panel, we have José Muñoz, who we just heard from. And as José just shared with us, he brings 25 years of cross-sector partnership work in youth, family, and community development to his role at the coalition, including a background as a community school coordinator. So let's dive right into it. I know we're going to have a great conversation today. I'd like to get started with our two current community school coordinators, Emily and Araceli. And Emily, I'll go to you first. What inspired or motivated you to transition to being a community school coordinator? I know you started off as a teacher at Mendez before you moved into this role. So can you tell us what inspired that move and tell us a little bit about your key responsibilities as a community school coordinator?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So I actually did a lot of my schooling in Guatemala. And so it was in Guatemala where I started to notice the importance of meaningful relationships and just really getting to know the community that you work with. So I was there, and I'm going to age myself, but in the 90s when the peace accord was being signed after the end of a civil war that lasted 36 years. And, I was in middle school at that time, and there was really no conversations happening in our school about what was going on. It was almost like, they didn't want to talk about current events, the students' mental health. A lot of our teachers were not part of the community and would kind of come and go once they clocked in, clocked out. And so when I decided to become an educator, I kind of, realized like, oh, I really want to live in the area that I teach in. I want to get to really know the community that I'm serving. And just be part of the neighborhood. And so I'm very blessed that the first place that offered me a job was in Boyle Heights. And so I moved, and I've been working and living there for 16 years. I raised my children there, and I've been part of the community. And as I started teaching, I began to realize there was a lot of need, right? So I was teaching 7th grade English. And so, topics would come up that, showed the need to address some of the social, emotional, or environmental issues that were happening in the community. So I'll give an example, a common book English teachers cover, or House on Mango Street, right, by Sandra Cisneros. In that book, there's a lot of issues around domestic violence and things like that. And so during that time, there was a whole Rihanna, Chris Brown case. A lot of the students were talking about teen dating violence and domestic violence. And so I, started looking around, and I was like, oh, there's the East LA Women's Center. Let's bring them in and have them do a presentation and share these resources with students. Mental health issues were coming up. And so I just started realizing that I felt I wasn't as equipped to be able to address, which is what led me to go on to into school counseling and kind of do restorative justice work. And so I think that's when I started really realizing the importance of, one, mapping out resources in your community, really getting to know what are the resources and the strengths of the community and bringing it into the classroom. And that then later led on to family engagement, right? And then, you know, just addressing the community in general. And so for me, it was a very easy transition. I do miss the classroom a lot, but I felt that I now knew, what were some of the needs and how, in order for our students to have academic success, they definitely, need to have their social, emotional, and physical needs met. And that is something that schools can offer. And so that's why I transitioned after 12 years into this role of community school coordinator. Thank you.
Awesome. It's really great to hear about how you really bring your life experience into your work. And I think that's so important. And Araceli, I would love to hear as well your story. What inspired you to become a community school coordinator, and what do you think of as some of the key responsibilities of your job?
Hello, everyone. So honored and happy to be with you tonight. So my motivation for the work, I became a community school coordinator after working in the Anaheim Union High School District for almost 10 years, first as a school community liaison, and then as a family and community engagement specialist. And both of those positions allowed me to connect very closely with my community and with my students and families. My motivation for becoming a coordinator, though, was to continue the work of transforming the education system into one that worked for my students and my families. So I'm from Anaheim, born and raised, and a graduate of our schools. I work the education system, I believe, to my benefit. I played the role of a model minority really well, and I made it work for me. But I saw that it didn't work for most of my friends that I had grown up with. And when I started with AUHSD, a year and a half or so out of college, I was young and I thought that if I could just share information with families in their language and help them learn the ropes and navigate the system, that the system could work for them too. Then through years of experience, I realized that the system wasn't built with our families in mind, and that it didn't work for them because it really wasn't set up to. My key responsibilities as a coordinator at Sycamore include assembling and facilitating my site-based community school advisory board. This is our democratic governance structure that guides the development and the implementation process of our community schools initiative at Sycamore. I'm also responsible for facilitating the needs and the assets assessment process, and for just being in tune with the different educational partners and sharing this data and presenting it to all of our stakeholders so that we're all aware of what the other group is experiencing and so that we stay connected. And then after identifying the needs, a big part of my job is to seek out partnerships to meet those needs. So to connect and to build and strengthen relationships with partnering agencies and groups. So from the courting phase to the drafting of our agreements, getting those agreements approved by our board of trustees, and then eventually implementing and adapting the programs and services at my site.
Thank you. I think there's so much in that response that you just shared. And I love the notion of making the education system work for students and families, because I think so often we expect students and families to bend over backwards to try to accommodate the system. And so we can think about things differently, that how can we really center students and families in this work? Jose, I would love to go over to you. I think we just heard from Emily and Araceli that community school coordinators have a lot happening in their jobs. And I think you pointed that out in your presentation as well. How do you right size the expectations for this role, knowing that there's a lot of different responsibilities?
Right sizing the expectations of the role. That's an important question because, even in that role and what I hear today, that's a struggle for school administrators. And Emily, I so appreciate you because you're coming from a classroom into the space right there. I mean, I couldn't imagine some of the difficulty and the transitions of, I no longer do that. I'm supposed to do this instead. So it's almost like I have a coworker, Krista Rowland, she's in music. And when she was first hired on, she talked about a band and how you kind of orchestrate that band. So I think the roles, you have all these different people, and I'm not doing it any justice, but you have all these different people who play these different instruments and have to read different music. And you have to somehow conduct so that they're making one beautiful piece of music. So that's really like the role of the coordinator, to right size that. What I've learned in even my personal career, but also working and talking to coordinators, is one, focus on the progress and not the perfection of things. I think folks get so caught on everything has to be just right. So, and what I mean by that too is a way to do that is actually identifying some indicators of progress. And so when you think about the coordinator role, people start looking at the tangible things like programs and services. They start looking at the outcomes as far as reading, writing, attendance, whatever that may be right away. But the number one role when you're orchestrating or when you're coordinating and you're organizing in such a way is that person's ability to actually bring people together. So things like the number of people participating in decision-making. I heard that the Democratic governance partnership that Araceli was talking about right there. Well, how do you do that in such a way where it is facilitated a democratic governance process where you move from having a meeting in the classroom to a library to a cafeteria to a gymnasium, where anybody who shows up can participate in the process right there. You could look at the things like the percentage of people who are closest to whatever that number is you want to change, but that are engaged in that process and that are actually have the most voice in that process. And then I heard also too from Emily and Araceli too about partners. What percentage of relevant partners? So sometimes folks can get this is mistaken that it's Ali oxen free. But there's some intentionality when you engage people about their hopes and dreams and what's blocking them from getting those hopes and dreams. There's some things that need to be mitigated, and there's some things that need to be put in place. And there's people, I heard the word, asset mapping your community. There's some people around who have something they can do to do that. And so really get intentional of keeping the role of the coordinator as the conductor of the orchestra, but measuring their progress and not perfection on, I have this much stuff, or hey, the outcomes aren't growing fast enough. There is some progress in bringing people together that will lead to that stuff.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful to just acknowledge that this work is really complex. And if we're talking about systems change, that it's going to take time and be messy and it's not going to look perfect for sure. I think as we're talking about systems change, I'd love to go deeper and, think about the role of the community school coordinator in supporting school transformation and what kind of supports do they need in order to be able to fulfill this role. What does it really look like for a community school coordinator to help transform a school? And I would love to go to you, Dr. Carroll. How do you see your role as supporting the ability of the community school directors that you supervise within the Beacon Network to advance transformational change? And what kind of supports do you offer them?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I'll say that I was them for 7 years of my life. So I had a really good idea about what we needed, especially at one school. But then trying to generalize that to 27 schools, which is right now where we are, is definitely, more of a notion. But in general, I felt like what's needed in those situations a lot of times is helping people to understand that the role of a community schools coordinator or a Beacon director or a resource manager or whatever the name is, the role is to help them to build relationships. Like for me, community schools is about building healthy relationships that can stand the test of time, so that as Jose was saying, on the way to getting to those amazing results, there's going to be some ups and downs. So these relationships have to be able to withstand those back and forth. So the things that we do in order to support folks is we bring them together monthly, and they would probably say way too many times, but we bring together several cohorts of community schools coordinators / Beacon directors to to talk with each other and to talk about what's going on at their schools, to talk about the challenges that they're facing, to talk about their wins. We also bring together the principals to talk about how community schools coordinators can work better together. We also put together like a toolkit for folks. We also have a beacon implementation guide. All of those things are what we use to inform the PLCs that we have together. We also encourage people to go to, for me, when I was just becoming a community schools coordinator, I went and studied a bunch of things, read books, and then I went to the Coalition for Community Schools website and whatnot. And we encourage people to join those networks in order to just reach out and build relationships with other coordinators, because it can be a job that feels isolating at times. Not everybody knows or understands how much of the glue and how much it feels to what the pressure is in order to feel like that glue is being appreciated and valued. So we have them talking with each other, and we try to bring together all the pieces around them so that people understand what's going on. We even bring together, we go through the community-based organizations. So we bring together the executive directors of the community-based organizations and the supervisors, just so that in service of supporting the crazy job, the crazy amazing job that is being a community schools coordinator.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to hear about all of those supports that you've built in. And just, I know that all of the coordinators, directors, managers out there are bringing amazing capacity and capability to their roles as well. So Emily, I'd love to circle back to you. What are some of the systems and structures and practices that you have put into place at Mendez High that enable you to support a culture of transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think really understanding the community is extremely valuable. And I always like to say, like, just like many of the communities represented in this call, Boa Heights has such a rich history of community organizing, right? We can talk about the Chicano student walkouts and their demands for, changing the school system. Mendez High School was, built 85 years after their walkout to try to fulfill some of their demands. The Mothers of East LA organizing to make sure prison wasn't built. Father Boyle and Homeboy Industries thinking about how we approach gang violence and really integrate former gang members, and the idea, right, that no one is disposable. And then the strike that we had with UTLA, right, teachers, parents, students getting together and really demanding, and imagining what our school system can look like when we provide dignity and respect, right, to all of the people in the school community. Reclaim our schools, students deserve. Like, there's just so much community organizing that I get to kind of learn from and include, the work. UTLA has done a great job of supporting the new community school coordinators and creating a network and providing us with professional development. And then similar to what Dr. Carol Hill mentioned, I am so blessed to have such an amazing principal, Principal Mauro Bautista. He is from the community, raised and lives there. His kids go to the schools. He refuses to leave. He turns down promotions and jobs and stays because he wants to continue building and growing and transforming the school. And I know that can be really rare, like to have a principal. He's been there since the school opened. We actually worked together at the middle school beforehand. So he kind of pulled me over to his school site, and I know that he trusts me, right? Whatever initiative, whatever, concerns I have, I can talk to him, and we have that trusting relationship. So I think that just having that support system, something that, we're often told in our community school professional development, is that as much as we want to be superheroes, like, we also have a team, and we need to build a team. That's part of the community school work, is to not think that it all falls on us. And so they've been really, pushing that on us, and we've had a chance to really think about, so who is our team, right? Who are the parent, organizers, student organizers, staff, leaders, that I can also build and bring in together to do this work collaboratively so that it can be sustainable, right? And long lasting. And so I think that that has really helped me, like just be set up at Mendez High School and work with so many amazing people, because I know that I'm not alone.
That is a beautiful thought. And thank you to you and to Dr. Carroll for both really highlighting the importance of those relationships. And I know that, you know, we have folks from Californians for Justice on this call who've been driving a campaign around relationship-centered schools. And it's something we want to see for our students and also for the adults in our system. And Araceli, I know you shared with us earlier that you have a background as a family and community engagement specialist and a community liaison. And I'm curious about how that has impacted your role, how you think about your role and how you think about building relationships.
Yeah, so I believe that all of these roles, and especially the coordinator role, I believe that, so what I've learned is that you have to have a strong desire to connect with people and become part of the community. So you're creating change with and not doing unto, right? And again, Emily has said it, Dr. Carol Hill, everyone on this call, that excellent relational capacity and understanding that relationships at all levels are essential to this role, with your students, with your parents, with the front office staff, with the community, every interaction, right? Really centralizing and the importance of building those healthy relationships and maintaining them long-term. I also think that vision work, right? Like vision through my years of experience, like plays a central role. And also more than that, for like a coordinator to be able to articulate vision clearly to all stakeholders and to inspire trust and to have an encouraging presence. So yes, this work day to day is hard, but it's so worth it. And aren't we having fun and growing? Another, I think, takeaway is the willingness to lead. So the coordinator role is a leadership role, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there and have hard conversations and be disliked at times, right? Because we are driving change. We are transforming a system. We are making schools work for families. So I think that is an important acknowledgement.
Absolutely. And I think we're really hearing today how, yeah, the coordinator role is absolutely one of leadership and of really being the center of so many relationships. Well, you know, I think I saw a little bit of questions in the chat around the sort of the staffing models around community school coordination. And Dr. Carroll, I would love to go to you for this next question. We're really wanting to explore the different ways that schools can staff the community school coordinator position and understand how staffing choices can impact the coordinator's ability to create a culture of change at the school. And just for a little bit of background for our audience, community school coordinators are often employed by the district as either certificated or classified staff like Emily and Araceli. But coordinators can also be employees of community-based organizations. And I believe that's the case for the Beacon initiative that you're leading. So can you just share with us some of the advantages and disadvantages of a staffing structure for a coordinator as a CBO employee?
Of course, happy to. When I was doing my dissertation, I ran across this article by this guy named Mark Warren, and it had several models of community schools strategies, right? So it had the school district CBO, it had parents and school district, like all kinds of, you know, this could be a broad, there are many people who can hold this position because it's not necessarily about a title for us, it's about the function, that coordinating, integrating, cohesive glue, as I was saying before. So for us, being the school district CBO model, I think some of the benefits are that, you know, you have two heads, right? Sometimes if you have a coordinator who is also, especially a certificated one, and they are an employee of the district, then they get to be pulled in, like they could go in and sub in a classroom. Now, this might be a little different these days because there's such a staff shortage, everybody's in the classroom. But the point is that you have two heads, meaning when you're employed by CBO, your supervisor is not the principal. Your supervisor is outside of the school. So you truly have to partner. Like, you have to go through the difficult and messy part of collaboration, because the principal is not necessarily your boss. Some of the other good things about that is that, so for instance, in my case, my principal was like, I cannot administer this grant. I have this money, I can't administer it. Nobody in the school can. And he just gave me the money and I administered the grant as the CBO partner, and it worked out for us. So there are many things that you can sort of pass off in this relationship, that if it can't be, if it's more cumbersome to be done by the school, it can be done by the CBO. And so we don't have sort of the same restrictions along the lines of challenges. Also for Beacons, we bring in a whole staff. Like, we bring in after school staff, we bring in resources, and we are funded by the city. Going into the money goes to the CBO. The challenges that come with that are that we are not school district employees, so we don't get direct access to data, right? That really is one of the main challenges that kind of works in to our disadvantage. The other thing is that we have, as I said, there's staffing shortages, and that is like nationwide for youth serving organizations. And it's difficult. It's difficult to run a staff, and it's difficult to keep staff members sometimes. There's a lot of longevity, of course, but in certain places it is difficult to keep it. So to keep folks employed. So I mean, that's sort of a broad slash at it, but the point for the thing I think that works in our favor is that idea of making relationships across sectors, as Jose was talking about. Like, that is it. A CBO is the third sector, and an educational institution is the second sector, and you are literally doing that cross-sector collaboration right in the moment when you have a school district and a CBO partner.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And I just want to pause and see whether any of the other panelists want to jump in on this question.
I think Dr. Carroll did a fantastic job in that, and I kind of agree. So in Albuquerque, when we're designing our system, it's multiple models. You have the city, the county, the school district, the United Way, the university, the Chamber of Commerce, and coordinators are hired by every agency of those, but also other nonprofits, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, other smaller nonprofits, grassroots organizations. So we had to do the messy work of actually partnering with people, not just at the programmatic level, on the neighborhood level, but across the system with electeds and executives, and because they were blending and braiding their funding. It is more difficult, but when I think about the sustainability, when it's like that, it's hard for one change of one organization transitioning change, of ending it, when you have everything blended together.
I can go ahead and jump in. I mean, I honestly think that it really did help that we hired from within, right? Since I had already been teaching at Mendez for 4 years, I had been the restorative justice coordinator. So I had already built and shared space with staff. And so when I transitioned to this position, I still know, my colleagues. I try to know our new staff members as well. And when I think about oh, there's this, community resource or partnership, I'm like, oh, this biology teacher would probably really, it would work well, or kind of making those connections because I do know them. And so I really appreciate that I already have that bond. And to kind of answer Brian's question on the chat, I still attend all the staff meetings, all the decision-making bodies include our teaching staff, so they're voting members as well. When we do the needs and asset surveys, we also, survey our teaching staff. So I'm very aware of what some of their needs and priorities are, and it's my job to advocate for that. So we're definitely work in collaboration with teaching staff. There's no weirdness oh, are you administration now? I've never felt that from teaching staff, and I continue to collaborate and work with them.
That's great. Araceli, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, to kind of go off of Emily and to speak to Brian's question in the chat, how do we get teachers on board and how do we get their buy-in? In Anaheim Union, we are very fortunate to have to be in partnership and do this work alongside our union, ASTA, and I believe some of our ASTA reps are here, but we are in our second year of our community school initiative, and really, I'd like to say our first year. So we have 2 pilot sites and we're looking to expand in this entire year. We've been working at a wider level in the community alongside of our union to bring awareness about community schools to all of our different educational partners, including our teachers. And they're with us presenting, they're hosting our community schools, like community-wide steering committees, and they're doing the work with us, and they're really helping us to get that teacher buy-in.
Thank you so much. I think it's really helpful to hear all of these different perspectives. And I think we know that, you know, the implementation is going to look different in different places, and that there's not like one right way to make these decisions. It just depends on the local context. So appreciate each of you for sharing. Let's see. Jose, I know we've been really focusing in on the community school coordinator role, but when we're thinking about school transformation, which I think is the vision that we're all holding for this initiative in California, I know that it's going to take broad and deep leadership to get there. It's not just going to fall onto one person. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts about systems or structures that community schools can put into place that sustain that work beyond just one person.
The actual community school itself.
Like thinking about
it. Separate this from the system piece of things, right?
Yeah.
So sustainability is key. I was writing down some notes when Carol, Emily, and Araceli were speaking earlier, because it really resonated to me when you're thinking about the sustainable part of what coordinators do. So when I travel in this role, and I often go to schools and they show me all the shiny things. And I'm really looking for the remnants of relationships, as was mentioned earlier. And then when I see all the shiny things, and it's great stuff, I said, if you were to leave today, what would happen to all these things tomorrow or next week? And I often get a look like, I don't know. But when I go to a school you can feel the relationships and people belonging and see in the hallways. And I ask that same question. Immediately the coordinator starts mentioning names and pointing to people, and I think about the sustainability. So I think it was Araceli. Araceli talked about the willingness to lead in there. And I'd like to add on to that about Araceli and Emily. When I hear you guys talk, I hear about you losing your leadership, how you are not empowering people, but you're emboldening people, like people where you're getting them to realize their own capabilities to lead in that school. Your relationships that you've established, I think of what Carol was mentioning. I always say relationships, relevance, and repetition. Carol, you talked about sometimes the coordinators may see it as bringing them together too much. Well, I laughed when you said that, because one of my frequent sayings when I was working with coordinators locally was frequency breeds consistency. So something to go into that 10,000 hours to become an expert in what that's the outlier, what's the tipping point outliers that book was in. And the reason why it's so important in this type of work for sustainability, because it is relationship building. And if I see somebody once a month, maybe once a quarter, am I really have an opportunity to establish a relationship? Or if we can create consistent venues where people begin to form relationships according to what's relevant for them, you can have multiple visions and multiple causes happening at the same time. So a coordinator, I remember bringing it was the American Federation of Teachers, the national union. And they came to a school site, or bumped to a school site. I didn't tell them that the coordinator was the one doing the staff training of all the teachers. I just had them sit in the meeting. And afterwards they said, wow, that principal really had everybody's attention. This is like a cafeteria full of people, teachers, parents, you name it. And I was like, that's not the principal. Who is that? Vice principal? That's the coordinator. You know, they were facilitating such an inclusive process of learning amongst the adults that the union was like, what? I said, that's the level. That's what a coordinator does. So when they walk away, this process that everybody has learned, you saw them participate in the process, it will continue regardless of principals, educators, the coordinators, whoever came to work in that neighborhood. The people who live there will continue.
Thank you. I love that vision of the community coming together in the cafeteria and just being in relationship with each other. And I think we're hearing a lot today about relationships and distributed leadership, and just we know that no one person can take us towards school transformation. It takes everybody working together. So, we have a few minutes left before we move on to the Q&A, and I would just love to hear from each of you for a few minutes. What are some of the 2 to 3 key takeaways that you'd like people to be thinking about, knowing that districts and communities are going to be hiring community school coordinators with the grant funding that's going to be coming out? So Araceli, I'll go to you first. As we think about this incoming funding and knowing that there's going to be a lot more community school coordinators in California, what are 2 to 3 key takeaways you want to share about this role? So that could be skills, experiences, or supports. What do you want people to know?
So I would say a recommendation for people considering the role, right, would be to put yourself out there and to continue your growth and learning. And when others seek your guidance or help, to be sure to offer it. So for school districts that are looking to hire community school coordinators, to look for this in people, right? Someone who values learning, who's a lead learner, and who is continually seeking to grow and to improve. And so a suggestion is learn from others what has and what hasn't worked for them, right? So José mentioned, you see something that's shiny, well, why did it work? Try your best to understand the context, and make time to connect with experts, to visit other community schools, to read the research and the articles, and to connect with networks and coalitions, and just try to devour as much as you can and try to learn. In regards to the system at the LEA level, or for those districts looking to hire, I would say a recommendation in regards to the system is this: to intentionally build the capacity of the staff as well. And, the community partners of the students too, around family and community engagement. But I feel like when we focus on the families, only on building the capacity, and we only offer opportunities and development for parents and families, we are, however, unintentionally pointing out their areas of growth, and potentially in a way covertly perhaps placing blame on families for the systems not working for them. So as you seek to expand or to establish community schools, I know that there's a big focus on capacity building for families and community, but look inward and see what are the areas of growth for your staff, as well as for those community partners supporting you in that work.
Love that. The dual capacity building for families as well as for educators. Dr. Carroll, same question to you. 2 to 3 takeaways, skills, experiences, recommendations that you want to share tonight about community school coordinators.
All right, so 2 to 3. I think what I'll speak because as we have said, I support 27 schools. So one of the things I think is super important is to set these coordinators and people in these positions up for success. That means, as I said, this person does not work in a vacuum. It's a really weird job. So you have to have all the pieces in place, or several of the pieces in place, so that this person feels like they actually can make progress. And then minimize the barriers for them. So for us as the CBO partner, minimize the barriers. That means we have to go in, build relationships with people, make sure there are opportunities to build those relationships. So I'm talking to people who, may be coordinating more than one community school coordinator or site. As far as for the actual coordinator, one of the things that Marty Blank, one of the OGs, community schools, OGs, was like, have yes in your heart, right? That means that there are going to be many people who come at, who are used to doing school in a particular way, in a traditional way. And sometimes this seems threatening to people. The community schools coordinator, the beacon director, and resource manager, whoever it is, has to have yes in their heart, and then be able to disseminate that yes, like to be that beacon of yes for folks, because there's so many ways that they can hear no. The other thing for me is I've always been like that person has to be able to surf. Like they got to be able to keep their balance when other people are not moving or moving too much. Everybody's moving around. They got to be able to keep their balance and be able to keep the focus on moving forward and, not just product, but process. So being able to continue, as I said, as you build those relationships, sometimes you're going to get the results you want and sometimes you're not. Being able to keep folks moving even when things are going bad, and then being able to celebrate when things are going well.
That is beautiful. Thank you. I love that. Have yes in your heart.
I'm going.
Keep surfing, and in terms of building community, I know Jose, the coalition also has a national network for community school coordinators, right? So that's another great resource that I know a lot of California coordinators have been part of. Okay, Emily, your 2 to 3 takeaways about skills, experiences, recommendations for districts and communities to consider when they're thinking about hiring community school coordinators.
I definitely think to really highlight the vision of community schools, right, what their purpose is. I really appreciate that Jose shared, like, it's not just wraparound services, it's not just a list of community partners, right, but that, we're not looking for a savior or a deficit model, but to really understand the importance of building alongside folks. And so I think like we need to move away from it's not just coordinating services or, being service providers or whatever, but that it's a lot more meaningful and deeper than that. So I would definitely ask that right away, like the person's, connection to the vision. And then, I've shared it many times, are really getting to know the community, the history, and, like the community partners too, like, again, they're not just service providers, they're also individuals. And so one of the things that I pride myself is that I really get to know each community partner. We celebrate retirements, we celebrate PhD acceptances, we celebrate hobbies. Like we really take time in our community partner meetings to like build community and get to know each other. Like we've had moments where we've even cried sharing about certain experiences. And these are people that are part of community organizations. And they've always share that they feel very welcomed at our school. I know many of you might do a site visit at Mendez High School. We're participating in the conference in June, and you'll see we have our community partners' name on the walls, on banners. We celebrate them. We're very thankful. We invite them to student performances. And so I think it's important to see that, to realize that, you're not just, coordinating services or not just anonymous people, but that you're actually trying to build that connection with everyone in the school community. And sometimes visiting those community organizations, right? Like I make it a point to attend events on their site. I also want to know where I'm referring families to. So I should also visit, what does this clinic look like? What, are they going to be treated well? We give them sometimes like a text crisis line. I've actually texted those to try to see like, what is the experience going to be like before I just, offer a number to a student. And so I think it's just, that like ability and desire to actually go out into the field and not just stay in the office, not just stay in the school, but really go out and meet the community partners, see their sites. If you can, maybe like alternate going to different sites, because I think it like that community organizing aspect and making those connections are so important. So not just staying, I would die if I had to stay only in my office. Like I need to go out into the field, into classrooms, classrooms into, outside in the neighborhood and things like that. And so I really think that that's something that a community school coordinator should feel comfortable and want to do.
That is beautiful. Thank you for reminding us that it's so important to think deeply about the vision that's driving this work. And I love that. Do not keep Emily locked in her office. She will not be happy. But I know that, I myself have had the pleasure of visiting Mendez, and I know you can feel the relationships when you step into that space. So it's really beautiful. I think we have time for one more question for this panel discussion before we move to the Q&A. So Jose, I would love to circle back to you. I know that you have been the leader of a network of community schools in Albuquerque, and now you're supporting the work nationally. And I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations about best practices for developing a pipeline of community school coordinators. As we're thinking about this work in California, how do we think about the pipeline for coordinators?
That's a great question. And so cultivation. So I think three words come to mind as I listen to Araceli, Emily, and Carol as well, is hire good people, co-create around a challenging vision, and then support them with everything you got. And so in the hiring, creating a pipeline, hiring a person, you just mentioned, Anna, about Emily, you can't see it on paper. You got to go somewhere where you can feel like, wow, who did this? Emily. Who did this? Somebody keeps pointing back to Emily, and I was like, who's Emily? I want to hire that person. So in creating a pipeline, hiring good people, Emily and Araceli are already doing that by how they are facilitating their decision-making process and how inclusive they are. They are in practice of distributed leadership. So they're losing their leadership in that. So they're already establishing a pipeline of people ready, parents who could be hired right now. So it's not about the credential you have. It's about that feeling that they can create and ability to move that process forward, as Carol said. The challenging vision. So I see Krista Rowland is on here. So congratulations, Krista. She's the Western Regional Deputy Director for us now, that was announced publicly earlier this week. And so she's learning firsthand in practice, where they probably were expecting to have some really cookie cutter new employee orientation. No, they gave presentations of what their visions were. We started putting things together, and they are putting stuff together still right now on how we co-create what this regional structure looks like, and not for me to be the one to actually have it all defined out. So you have to be okay with a little ambiguity for a little while. So that's one. I'll give that to school districts, other folks hiring folks. And then finally, how you support them. And this one might choke me up. This year, in my Albuquerque work, we lost our very first community school coordinator. She passed suddenly. And Reina Luz. And Reina, she was that person you can go and feel the entire neighborhood of her leadership and how she was so important. For her memorial, the mayor closed off streets, had motorcycle police car brigades, and we walked for about 30, 40 minutes through the streets that she organized in. That's a powerful person. Now the supporting part and putting everything you could support her. Reina Luz, God rest her soul, was horrible at paperwork. So we actually, in order for Reina Luz to fully optimize her strength, we had to create the infrastructure. We had to have the flexibility to create the infrastructure so we can continue to get the funding for her, so we can continue to do the reporting for her and things like that. But we didn't hire her to do that. We hired her to do what she was doing well. So that's what I mean by supporting. If you're a school district, and believe me, I was leading this, I was a county employee. So I had to report to the county manager and the county commission. And I have reports and stuff due. You want to keep getting our funding, you got to get this stuff. I had to give it to the school district. So that was yes, honoring her legacy tonight. So it still chokes me up as you see with Reina. But we had to create a whole different structure. And I had to have those hard conversations with folks and say, hey, this is the way we have to go. If we want to see the results, what she produced constantly and consistently, we had to change our structure when we thought about things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing her memory with us, and may her memory be a blessing. And I think that we are, just in this conversation, we're seeing that there's not one right background or perspective or experience that gets you towards being prepared for this work, but it's really about the relationships, the learning orientation, the, being part of a community. Really, thank you to everyone who has been submitting questions in the chat. We're excited to kick off the question and answer portion of our program, and especially excited to have a student and a parent that are both coming from San Bernardino City Unified School District with us, where ICUC leaders and staff are organizing around racially just and relationship-centered community schools. So with us, we have Lupe Dolan, who is a junior at Pacific High School and also a student organizer with Inland Congregations United for Change, as you've heard, ICUC, which is part of Pico, California. And we also have Minister Keisha McGee, who is a parent organizer and board president with Inland Congregations United for Change. And I think we're just going to have those two individuals spotlit. We'll come back to our panelists in a moment. So welcome, Lupe and Minister Keisha. Lupe, would you like to start by asking your question? Oh, I'm sorry if I gave incorrect directions. Maybe we do want our panelists. Are we all supposed to be spotlit right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jessica. I'm sorry for confusing things. Lupe, would you like to ask your question and our panelists can respond?
So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Lupe, and my question for our panel is, what have the students gained in having a strong community school coordinator, and how does attending a community school differ from attending a quote unquote regular school for students?
Excellent question. I'm going to open it up and see which of our panelists would like to respond.
I can go ahead and respond. So something that's really important about community schools, in which I saw a huge transition, is that really allowing the different stakeholders to participate in making decisions. And a lot of times students don't get to have that input. And so one of the things that came from becoming a community school is that our student leadership became a lot more intentional. And so, we have a very strong student government. They participate in local school leadership, school site council, but they also get to survey their students, present their needs, organize around certain issues. And we really take their concerns, just as important as any other stakeholder's concern. And so I think for the past few years that we've been at community school, a lot of our students have shared that they feel that they are listened to and that they see like direct action come from a lot of the needs and priorities that they bring up. And, before, students didn't really necessarily have an outlet to do all that, but now, because they're at the table with us, they can definitely bring in their concerns. We've developed also a House of Representatives to make sure that all the grade levels are, represented. And so that's definitely a big shift that we've seen, is student leadership and always including them and their ideas, and that they go back and talk to their peers and bring in issues to the table.
Excellent. I wonder if any of our other panelists would like to respond.
Yeah, I'd like to respond. I think that's a great question. Going off of what Emily said, really uplifting student voices and making sure that students are part of the decision-making that is going to directly affect them, right? Like our community schools are first and foremost for our students and for our families. So making sure that you have a place at the table. And work that we're particularly doing at Sycamore this year is connecting with those students who typically don't engage, right? Who typically aren't going to go to like a a student summit or a forum with our principal, right? So really trying to connect, identify those students, connect with them, and to see why school hasn't necessarily been working for them, and to get their opinions directly from them and to bring them to the table. We do have some of those students represented on our community school advisory board, and their voice and what they've shared has been really impactful. Just this last meeting that we had last week, our students expressed concerns over some issues that have been going on after school and before school and during lunch. And these kids aren't the ones that would typically speak out. So we have the interests of all of our students in mind, and particularly those historically underrepresented students.
Can I jump in a little?
Please do. Yes.
Great. So also in San Francisco, through the Beacons, we have undertaken youth participatory action research, so YPAR. And that is with elementary school kids and middle school kids. It's particularly after the pandemic, where folks were feeling so out of sorts and so, disempowered in a way, or, disemboldened, as Jose was framing it. But having them help with, or actually run a YPAR project was amazing. And they get to inform not just their schools, so not just the 27 schools, they get to inform the funders, so who are actually listening, because everybody's so kind of out of, as I said, out of sorts around what all we should be doing. So they get to inform the funders and the politicians. So the school board and folks in other different mixed group of stakeholders. So we also have, as a part of our network, BIPOC liberation is our, BIPOC student liberation is one of our core tenets for our model. So we have different youth groups that inform, as I said, decision making, bringing up issues that are coming up, and also helping, like doing a sort of ladders of leadership thing. So going from being a student to being a program leader to being whatever else comes next. So,
and I love to build on that. So the question, what does a young person get when you get a community school coordinator? And so as we've been talking about coordinators, we've been talking about a person who can navigate through multiple worlds and facilitate on multiple levels of decision making. So you get an automatic, you got this coach. So you got a community school coordinator, you got a coordinator who now is bringing young people into these multiple worlds and making sure they have access on multiple levels of decision making. So somebody who is building young people's social capital, which goes a long way. And I say, you got this coach, because being a coordinator, and I still do this today, that you get to a certain point where you see a young person's capability, but they may not quite have that confidence yet to get out there. And then you put them in that situation and say, you got this. Example, we're preparing for this conference we're having this year in Los Angeles. It was supposed to happen in 2020. So a few years ago in 2020, early 2020, 2019, I was out in Los Angeles preparing for it. And we had this big old meeting. It was like 100 different partners. And this young lady named Nisalai from UCLA, one of the UCLA community schools. And I have been working with Nisalai as a next generation coalition leader. It's a different topic. But I kind of noticed her ability as she was helping us build this new coalition for young people. And so we're at the meeting and I was supposed to speak. And I leaned over to Nisalai, I was like, you want to talk to them? And then she was like, looked at me like this. I was like, you got this. And she went out there and knocked it out the park. So a coordinator who has to navigate through all these multiple spaces and bringing young people and creating access for young people to multiple spaces, get this feeling, it becomes your automatic, you got this coach. So doing that for a whole school is amazing.
Thank you. It's really great to hear this wide range of responses. Lupe, I hope that was helpful for you to hear. I'd love to turn things over to Minister Keisha. I know you have a question as well.
Thank you. So I'm a parent that sits on school site council, but not all parents have that opportunity. So my question is, what is the role of the community school coordinator ensuring that parents, caregivers, and communities have access to financial budgets of the school and being able to advocate for how those fundings are being allocated to meet families' needs?
Go for it, panelists.
That's going to be different depending on context, but I'd say, you familiar with the term opportunity cost, Keisha? It's like, you lost out because you didn't invest in the next best thing. Or like, how do I know to invest in the next best thing if I don't know how much money I got? So if I'm sitting around this table and I'm supposed to help make the right decisions for our young people and for my local community, how am I supposed to make a fully educated decision and I don't have all the information? So if you really want, I'm not saying that's the coordinator's role, but if we really want parents, and I'm a parent of 5, Keisha, I have 5, I have no more children, they all adults, 18 to 30 now. So let me tell you, whoever said the 90s thing, oh, it was Emily. But I think in order for me to make decisions, I not only need to just share with you what the issues are and what the possible solutions, but I need to know what my resources are so I can make the most common sense decision. So whoever's role that is, principals may have that, they may have that authority. Sometimes school districts may hide that from them. So I'll let Emily and Araceli speak to a coordinator's role since they are coordinators.
Hey, while you think about it, I got one. So that along the lines of what Jose was saying is, as a person who is, responsible for kind of, like I said, kind of bringing people together, many times what a coordinator has to be really an expert at is like facilitation, also needs assessments and that kind of thing. So if, and I encourage this, if the coordinator sits on the school site council, then that person will have a front seat at kind of looking at how all of the business is being done. I think that if they see that the parents are not as equipped, because one of the things about being on the school site council is it can be a little intimidating for people. So you have to build up the capacity of the parents to actually be dealing with these budgets and the, some things that they might be intimidated by, like sitting in a room trying to make a decision about which way a school is going. So, and that's that thing around making relationships with people. Like you have to be able to invite people in, right? So you invite people in by saying, hey, do you want to know how this, how to make these decisions? Or do you have, or how would you like to learn about budgets or whatever? It's those things that help them to build up their capacity so that when they're in these decisions, at these decision-making tables, they're actually not just sitting there, because that's what people say. They're like, parents, let's just be there. We have parents here, we have kids here. But if you don't teach them how all of that works, if you don't teach them the inner workings of a budget, then it doesn't matter. They're not really making informed decisions with the school that will help them. So you have to build up their capacity to learn, their capacity learning about budgets and how to actually sit in these spaces and make these decisions with folks.
I agree with Dr. Hill, definitely. Our coordinators make sure to have those kind of workshops, right, where they share and explain the budget process. I'm seeing Adela Moreno's comment, right, making sure that there's adequate translation. And then also we're very fortunate that the union and the district has been really awesome about creating workshops and kind of sessions where they tackle and share about different budgets and, you know, how our parents can be empowered to have a say in those decisions. And so there's also those opportunities where they can attend some of these sessions. And I guess the good thing about the pandemic is a lot of our meetings have shifted to virtual. So we're noticing that more parents are able to participate virtual because now they don't have to worry so much about going onto the school site. So that's definitely been helpful in allowing more students to, more parents to participate in a lot of these training sessions.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can
Go
add,
ahead.
sorry, if I can add to that, sitting in the spaces where like the budgets and like the SPSA, where it's typically like started or discussed, right? Like in leadership before it goes out to like, before it's shared with like families or students or community, like you're there and you're advocating, right, for transparency. So it could be that, you know, the SPSA has only, or the single plan for student achievement has only been shared with our school site council reps. And then you're sitting like in the leadership meeting, and that's your like responsibility, I feel like, as a community school coordinator, to be like, and have we shared it with the rest of families, and how are we doing that? And how are we making sure that other families have the opportunity to engage and to ask questions? Or like Dr. Hill said, that our parent reps and our parent leaders have the capacity to advocate on the behalf of other families, or to understand a document like the single plan for student achievement or a budget. So providing the information, yes, but also providing, like Dr. Hill and Emily have said, the capacity building so that parents can be successful as advocates, and so that they could truly engage and take on their role as parents on these councils and in decision-making spaces.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Lupe and Minister Keisha, for asking such great questions. I think we have a little under 10 minutes, and I know there's been a lot of questions that were both pre-submitted and also that people shared in the chat. So would love to jump to a few of those. Let me start. I see that we had a live question in the chat from Lupe Gutierrez with True North. Would you like to ask your question, Lupe?
I'm sorry, I had several questions, and so I don't know what I wrote into the chat, but I'll tell you one that we were discussing. We were kind of wondering about student voices. How do you develop students to have their voice? Because I know particularly in the middle school and high school, sometimes you get, when you talk about an emboldened student, they're so emboldened that they can turn off an audience. So how do you develop a student's voice in a respectful manner, and to let them know that they have to be respectful to be influential?
Great question. And I'm just going to say, you know, I'm hoping we can get through a couple questions, so maybe we can have like, you know, a couple of responses to each question and then move to the next one. But such an important question. How do we develop student voice?
I'll jump in if nobody's gonna. I know I've been talking a lot. I'm conscious of it. But this is a deal with, because Beacons have a Beacon director, but they also bring a whole staff. So we do out of school time. And as I said, there's that piece, which is a core piece of our model, which is emboldening student voice. And building student voice. And I don't know, I would have to talk with you more, Lupe, about what you mean about being respectful about it. Cause I don't know. I don't clip and I don't advocate for, students coming at it in a certain way. Like, I feel like some students, students have to come at it from wherever they are. And I feel like that's our job as youth developers, is to meet students where they are. And then help them to grow by seeing options, right? And then that thing about building relationships is also key for us with how we help our students to exercise their voice, right? So making sure that they are built up on the inside, making sure that they have people, caring, trusted adults that they can talk to, and also building up their group of folks that we are all, across the board, students, putting decisions in front of them and helping them work through how to get to a decision for themselves. So putting issues in front of them and helping them work through how to get to decisions, and then putting them in front of the people, right? So putting them in front of, as I said, teachers, politicians, funders, all of that helps them to build their voice. I think, you know, a voice is a matter of confidence a lot of times. All of our students have the ability, every single one of them have the ability, and it's a matter of believing in them and helping them to believe it about themselves. And then that piece where they get to speak it is like the last part of it. The first part of it is helping them to feel it. That's that yes part, having them to say yes to being able to make decisions and take ownership of their own voices and their own education, their own lives.
Absolutely. And so it's something that I've really learned, I think, in this space with so many of the amazing organizers on this call is that, you know, inviting students in a really authentic way. You're not just plopping them into like a situation or a meeting. You're building that relationship and really empowering them to come in and be a powerful participant in those spaces. Okay, I'd love to jump to another question. This was pre-submitted by Kim T, who's a parent and a co-founder of the Black Parents and Guardians Circle in Long Beach Unified. She asked about, you know, how do we build trust between parents in the district, and in particular, how do we get districts to center the academic needs of Black students?
Wait, say that again. I had distraction in my background.
The question was, how do we build trust between parents and the district, and how do we get districts to center the academic needs of Black students?
Follow the data, I would say first. Districts, superintendents get fired and hired because of the data. Unfortunately, they don't get hired and fired because of parent engagement. And that's just I'm just speaking of reality, you know, when you think about school boards and stuff. But if the data is showing that it is any group, whether it be Black, Indigenous, whoever it is, if there's any group where the data is saying that is not doing well, there's a deeper conversation. So that deeper conversation within any context should be to talk to the people who are raising those young people, whoever that is, parents, relatives, neighbors, you know, whoever that is to talk to them and find out, why is this happening? And if it points the finger at you, be willing to do something about it. If it doesn't point the finger at you, but somewhere else, be willing to step in the gap.
Yes, and I see our panelists jumping in the chat, so I'm thinking you have more responses.
Okay. I was just putting it in the chat. I want to make sure I understand the question. It's how, can you tell the question one last time?
Yeah, it was kind of a two-parter. How do we build trust between parents and the district, and how do we get districts to center the academic needs of Black students?
Okay, so I mean, that is a question. And what I wrote is that it's a matter of sometimes building and sometimes rebuilding trust. So is there a sense of repair? Is there a willingness on everybody's side to actually do that? And then how do you get to the willingness if there's no willingness? You know, that's a tough, I don't think there's a formula for it. I think that is a matter of people figuring out how to kind of, as Jose said, how to come to an idea that there is a common goal, right? If there's a common goal, how do we get to the common goal? And then how do we track to that common goal? If the common goal is to make sure that our parents and our students, especially particularly our Black parents, feel welcome, feel like they are respected, feel like they are meant to be there. Our districts have to make sure that is a priority. And I don't have an answer as to how you make them do that. I know that I've seen it work in different places, but there has to be a willingness on folks' part. Sometimes it's a matter of money. Sometimes it's a matter of bringing in some dollars from, you know, the side somehow to get and doing it school by school by school. So sometimes it's not like a district priority, but maybe you know, parents organizing with a little bit of capital and then bringing in what they need to see, right? So do we need to see ethnic studies classes? Do we need to see this? You know, it's a tough question because it has the issues of, you know, racism, white supremacy, like it's a systemic issue that everyone is dealing with. So I feel like going at it a little bit at a time helps people to sort of helps you to kind of bring folks along. But it's incremental. And that thing that Jose said earlier about progress, like celebrating the progress, if there's any progress, and the perfection part, you know, who knows about it, but celebrating whatever steps towards whatever the goal is, you know, that's at least, that's a start.
And if I could just add a little different context to this question right here. So the average tenure for a superintendent is 2.4 years. So when you have that in any organization, especially at the top decision maker of any organization, heck, any household, you have a decision maker change that many times. The other people begin to hold on to what's theirs. And it's tough to let go because you don't know what the next person may try and take away or change in there. So, you know, yes, when we say the district, I'm not forming a relationship with any entity. I'm forming people build relationships with people. But when you have a key person changing, this is universally, I know it's generalization of 2.4 years. What I've seen in doing this work across the country is people in the mid-level professionals and managers get a little bit more tighter with their cheese on there. So when they say the district, we start blaming the person, but they have some insecurities too about their jobs too. So sometimes, you know, so I'm not saying the parents that's not parents' role to go change that. I'm just bringing this up to bring some different context to also understand what the other person is going through.
Yeah. And, you know, I also just want to note that in the chat, we're having a conversation about some of the organizing that has happened in LA Unified around the Black Student Achievement Plan. And maybe one of our colleagues can share a link in the notes, because I know that there was funding prioritized for community schools. So I know that we need to wrap up this discussion because it is not over and we could keep going for quite a long time. But please continue sharing your thoughts and resources in the notes. And yes, Araceli, were you wanting to say something before we wrap up?
I was just speaking to Senora Moreno's point in the chat. She wrote it in Spanish, but she wrote, build the confidence of the parents, because the district will use parents for, you know, at their convenience. So just kind of, I know this can be a sentiment in a lot of places, right? But again, sometimes what we have to do is just start by listening, right, to what parents are saying and where the distress has come from, and maybe the history of like the relationship with the organization. And then just follow through, like begin just by following through with, like, be faithful in the small things and be faithful in the big things. And just every interaction is an opportunity to build that trust and to build those relationships. And let's make sure that we're electing and hiring leaders that place families and communities and put our students first. And let's not forget that we're the ones who elect our board members, right? And our board members are the ones that appoint our administrators and our district officials.
At that, I think that is a wonderful note to wrap up on. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists